to Unapologetically Fierce with Faythe, brought to you by CKJ Live. This is a safe place where my beloved tribe members and I put anything and everything on the table and dish the unfiltered tea. We are not just a podcast, we are a movement. So get your favorite beverage on hand and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. My name is Faythe, and I'd like to welcome you to Unapologetically Fierce with Faythe and a few of the members of my tribe. This is a safe place where we put anything and everything on the table and dish the unfiltered tea. I would like to introduce Kerri, Myrna, and Tamara. Hey, ladies.
Hi.
And tonight we have a very special guest, my friend Angel. Hey,
Hi.
Angel. Hey, girl.
Hi, everyone.
You're welcome.
So I think this has been a really interesting series because this is week 4 of it. So it's kind of like the final. We talked about week 1. We talked about dating, and the fuck boy, and then we talked about courting, marriage, and today we're talking about divorce. I think it's kind of like, you guys know I'm obsessed with Candy Crush, right? So I'm on level 241 right now. So it feels like that high level of okay, I'm trying to keep my foundation up. And I think that's what, tonight, even though it's unfortunate because divorce, whenever you think of divorce, you think of finality, like it's final. That's it. Many, and I think that the reason why is because so many people get married for so many different reasons. And they, the reason why I did the steps of dating, courting, all of that, dating, courting,
Fuck boys.
Marriage.
Yeah, and marriage, all of that, right? Maybe I drank too much. But yeah, so we talked about that before. And it's kind of like a level. It's kind of like a game. Because if you can get from sifting out the fuck boys, then actually go on a date, then okay, well, hey, I may commit. I'm committed to you. So now we're courting. Okay, it's cool. Let's get married. And like we said last week, I know that my vision of marriage was very different because my parents were divorced. But, one thing I've learned, though, is that marriage is not for the weary. We live in such a society now that it's microwave, everyone wants a microwave relationship, microwave this, microwave that. And everyone is flexing on the gram, on Facebook. Girl, look at my ring, look at my pictures. But it's so much more than beyond the pictures, beyond the wedding day, beyond the ambiance. Do I really like you? And the thing about it is that we have to build that foundation in dating that, okay, I actually like you. Because if I don't like you as a person and we're not friends, I'm just like, you know what? He's cute. He has that, we're talking about, we're all grown. We're talking about, he has that third, leg. It's okay. Yeah, but you don't marry people because of that, because that changes. Mm-hmm. And then, so you have to maintain and grow and have a healthy relationship. Because a lot of times I remember from Jerry Maguire about when the girl that he was dating, Renee Zellweger, was that her? And she's like, you complete me. Come on. You have to go into marriage complete. You can't have two halves. What do you guys think? Tam, Kerri, you guys are married. You don't say, oh, you complete me. It's a lot of work, right?
You shouldn't. Unfortunately, a lot of people still think that They think that coming together is going to now make two halves a whole, and everything's going to be happily ever after. It's just a rude awakening. And I just recommend people start really working on themselves before they get attached or involved with someone else.
Exactly. Because I prophetically say I see a therapist, and I'm not ashamed to say that. And you're not going to come rolling on in and knocking all the work that because where's the work that you've done? We both have to do the work. And I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine. I was telling her about the podcast and about the series. And she was just like, you have to go into this as okay, I'm good right now. I don't need you. It's good to have you there, but I don't need you. You compliment me. You have to compliment me in order to ride this. Like, you have to compliment me. Do you guys agree?
I do. And I definitely think that goes back to when we were discussing, like, courting. It's important that, like, you get to know the person. And, you have to like the person and all that stuff too, like you said. But I also feel like you have to talk about the future, because I feel like a big thing is, like, you evolve as a person. You don't stay the same. So the reasons why I married you, 20 years ago may not be the same things that are important to me now, 20 years later. So I feel like you have to grow with the person and evolve. So I feel like those talks are the things that come up, like, in the beginning, and take the time to get to know the person and get to know yourself, know what you want, so that way you can express to that person what you want, so you're on the same page. Because it's not about we're on the same page today. You still have to be on the same page 20 years from now,
And it's communication. Myrna, we always kid about it, and we say, use your big boy words. Use your big girl words. Let's talk about it. Don't just walk away from it. Just use your words. I did a little bit of research, and I saw that the divorce rate is 3.2 per every 1,000 people. And the marriage rate is 6.5 per every 1,000. That's interesting, because a lot of people don't get it. A lot of people don't get married anymore. A lot of people are like, hey, I like how this is going. Let's just feel that, whatever.
Right. I think that people are just disenchanted from marriage anymore, because a lot of the examples of marriage that we see are through media, and they're either over exaggerated or they are, ratchet and destructive and toxic. So you don't have an in between where you just see a normal, healthy relationship that goes through its ups and downs and, makes it through. You just see the Jocelyn and Stevie, or, you see Will and Jada. You don't have a realistic view of marriage.
The entanglement.
Right.
We don't.
And so you have a lot of younger people that don't understand what it is.
People don't understand. You're right. People don't understand. And I think the worst thing, and again, I'm not an expert at this, but the worst thing could probably be is someone tell you, like, hey, someone that you thought was writing for you, that, like, I don't love you anymore, or like, I can't be in. Those are hurtful words. Those are really hurtful words. And, again, people get married for the wrong reasons. I'm not saying that because I'm single, maybe I'll get married, maybe I won't, but I'm not as focused as I was in my 20s, And I'm just learning faith. I can't learn myself and you and, like, and try to fit, like, I have to be my own person. Again, you complement each other. So it's not like I'm picking you up and I'm like, okay, you're not feeling right, let me woo or whatever. Like, I got to figure myself out. We're individuals. Because once you leave a marriage, you are individual, an individual. So what do you got? I know that Tam, Kerri, both of you guys are married. Myrna, you are currently in a separation. Can you tell us about your story?
Sure. Yeah. I think for us, part of the I wouldn't say a problem, but I think what started to surface is that we got married really young. And to Tamara's point that she mentioned earlier, people do evolve and they change. And but I think one of the things that people forget is that there are some core values that we all hold that usually follow you through life. So even though that your preferences may change, your values a lot of times kind of stay consistent. So what I started to just kind of see happen as time unfolded and I became more of who I was meant to be and my husband became more of who he was meant to be was that our values were just very different. And, you get to a certain age, and me and you, Faythe, we talk about this all the time, where it's just our tolerance for things that don't serve us decreases with time, it diminishes, and it's sort of like, this isn't working for me anymore. And as painful as that process is, uncovering it, doing everything you can to figure out if it can be salvaged, and then ultimately just resigning yourself to that it can't, and you have to move on. It's a painful process, but I think a lot of times, you have to allow for that. I think with time, as time is changing, and people are becoming a little bit more, maybe less worried about what other people will think if they are divorced. I think we're starting to get to a place where you're walking away from relationships and trying to do it in a really healthy way, so that everybody ultimately does end up whole and healed and not necessarily traumatized from the experience.
Exactly. It's it has to be tough because it's like something that you've worked on, and it's just like, something that you've worked on, and it's like it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. And ultimately, when you spend that much time with someone, they do become a huge part of who you are. And we always talk about, being whole. I want to be whole before I enter into the next long-term relationship. I'm not looking for anyone to complete me, because then that means that when they leave, they take a part of me with them. So instead, what I want to do is work on being a whole self, a whole individual who is ready for whatever comes next. And if it leaves, and I'm still a whole individual. But when you spend that much time with somebody, there's this journey that you go on as you start to separate from one another about figuring out who you are outside of the identity that you had with the person that you've been with all your life. Which in my case, we've been together since we were teens, married almost 19 years in August. So, there is this self-discovery that I'm on right now, but I think what I'm starting to learn is like this grace about forgiving myself for having to walk away and whatever I contributed to the demise of my marriage, but also trying to stay hopeful and optimistic about what comes next. So it's like, it's a balancing act. Some days it's easier than other days. But I think if more people went into the relationship thinking about how they would like it to end, you wouldn't see as many quick marriages or fly-by-night relationships. You might see people taking more time to kind of consider what Tamara was talking about earlier. How am I going to grow old with this person? Because those values, like I was saying, are going to probably stay the same. Like, I'm a person that values a lot of like stability, and I like things to be the same. I'm very routine oriented, and my ex is not. He values freedom. He's spontaneous in a way that I am not. So ultimately, it ended up driving us apart. But I think if more people think about those things, like how's this going to shape up when I'm 70 and he's 74, I think you'd see less people walking into these marriages that are ultimately going to fail. So.
Yeah, because I don't think that you go into marriage thinking, you know what, this is going to fail anyway. You don't. You're hopeful. And
I think that's the whole idea of coming together with someone else, is this idea that we're going to be better together as a unit.
Exactly. Now, from that, I would like to introduce I'd like to have my guest introduce herself. Angel and I have known each other for years, but I will let Angel introduce herself. And Angel, tell us about yourself.
Hello, everyone. Of course, my name is Angel. I am 43, and that's significant to me because I've been married and divorced twice in my life, and I've gone through a slew of relationships, mostly, before and after, but I experienced a marriage that was full of love and one that was devoid of love. So I have the perspective of both, and I'm willing to answer any questions you may have. It's a roller coaster of experiences with the both of them. The first one was someone I considered to be my soulmate, and we actually remained friends throughout the marriage and after the divorce for a very long time. The second marriage was the devil himself. That was something that I made a poor choice. It was a bad choice. It was a poor judgment. But I did learn a lot from both of those relationships. So now at the age of 43, I have a lot of boundaries that I didn't necessarily have before. I have a lot of insight and a lot of intuition that I tap into that I didn't before. So that's where I am now.
We're excited that you're on the show, and thank you so much for sharing. Tell us a little bit about the first marriage. Like, how long were you guys married, and what were not of course the details, but what made it, what made things change on one of the.
So we met in July of 2004, and actually the end of June. And I went to a party with him a few days later, and we were inseparable ever since. We were like frick and frack. It was even me, him, and his sister. We were like the three amigos. I was close with his parents. Like it instantly absorbed me into their family, and I felt really a part of that whole unit. So we just naturally progressed. We were together a total of 6 years, married for 4. So we got married 2 years in. However, speaking of the red flags, he cheated on me from beginning to end. And our love for each other, and it sounds kind of ironic with him cheating, how can you really love someone that you're cheating on consistently? But we had such a bond and such a connection and such a love for each other, regardless of anything that, he put me through, I put him through, that we just tried really, really hard to stick it out, and there were times that I would talk to him as a psychiatrist. I don't have a degree, but I knew my husband, and throughout that whole process, we determined why he cheated. Mm. And of course, it has nothing to do with the woman that you are, but it did have something to do with the women in his life, his mother and other issues. So with that being said, we identified the issue, but couldn't get control of it. And so ultimately, that's what ended the relationship. But we were still best friends afterward. I mean, we went to the courthouse together to get the divorce, if that says anything.
Right. Wow.
That's really amazing that you're able to walk away together, because a lot of times when people divorce, it just gets ugly, especially, and I know that you don't have any kids. So that was probably,
no, I don't.
Was that easier because you didn't have any kids, do you think?
I'm sorry, you kind of break.
No, I was saying, was that easier? The dissolve of the marriage easier because you didn't have kids?
The funny thing about that is neither one of us had kids when we got together. He had slept with a lady a month before we got together, right before he moved from Tennessee to Atlanta. And she ended up pregnant, but didn't know that the baby was his until the next January. So we went through the situation of him getting a request for a DNA test. And I had to decide whether to continue the relationship with a man who now has a child and a baby's mama, I don't know her, that whole situation, or going about myself and finding somebody else. But we, like I said, we had such a bond that we came together, and, what we had to do. Was devastating, but it was hard to let the little boy go too, because that was all he knew as his stepmom for 6 years. You get
attached. So tell us about your second marriage.
So the second marriage, I knew.
Or how long were you married the first time?
The first time we were together 6 years. We were married for 4.
Okay.
The second marriage, we were together 3.5 years, and we were married for 2.5. So we got married about a year in.
Okay, that's a reasonable amount of time. So, go ahead and talk up and tell us about.
So the second one, I knew him in high school. He was a senior when I came in as a freshman. So we knew each other briefly, and then he left and went to the Army. So I hadn't talked to him over the years, but we were social media friends, and he wasn't very active on social media. So I didn't know his life. A mutual friend of ours reached out to me and said, hey, this guy wants to talk to you. And I was like, oh, God, I know him. And so we started talking over the phone. He lived in Charlotte, and I was in Atlanta. He was a truck driver. And so he would come through Atlanta like 2 or 3 times a week. So it's kind of like, there's no issue with us dating. I saw him all the time. He was, Prince Charming. He was just the kindest, most humble, sweetest guy. He would just, spoil me, not necessarily financially, but just with attention and, everything. And then he would do things like take, trips, and, he's cooking for me when I get off of work, when he's on his way through. And it was just such a whirlwind of romance. I ended up moving to, I'm skipping a part, but I ended up moving to Charlotte probably 9 months into our relationship. So we started talking in August, and I moved here in May. But in between that time, another red flag, the lady that had raised his kids, not their mother, but the lady that had raised his kids, was actually still living in the house when he and I began dating. And
in the same house?
The same house. I later found out, well, he told me, and then I later confirmed that he slept downstairs, she slept upstairs, but we all know what that is. We all know what that is. And I say that important part, not just because it was a red flag, but because that caused an issue the rest of our marriage, with boundaries with his family, boundaries with her and their attachment to her. It was just a clusterfuck. So, when I moved here, nobody was ready for me to be here because, like I said, she was here already. She had been there raising his kids, and they'd had this long relationship. And, when I came, because he kind of... So
wait a minute, they had a relationship before?
They had a relationship after he left his wife because she had issues, and he left his wife and took the kids. Well, they divorced, I should say, and took his kids. He had moved back home and met her, and they got together, and they were together like over 10 years, and she helped raise the kids because he was a single father.
Got it.
Yeah. And so she was ingrained in their life. And so when I came along, it was like, who is this lady trying to come in here and assume the role? Like, and I'm looking at him like, I'm not trying to assume anything. Like, I'm just, I'm here. But things progressively got really, really toxic. And no one here had the respect for my position as a wife, including him. He didn't stand up for me. And there was just a whole bunch of me praying and asking God, do you want me to leave this marriage? Because I'm trying to do the right thing. I know you hate divorce. I've already done it once. Like, what do I do? And, time progressed, and he showed me it's time for you to go. So I left. And
wow.
That was probably, being here in Charlotte was probably the loneliest, most depressing time because of, what I was going through with that marriage and just the detachment. And it was completely polar opposite of what I had before, where I was deeply ingrained in the family. And we had this, bond that nothing, could break but us. It was completely opposite. So, from one end of the spectrum to the other, they both ended in divorce.
So where are you today, Angel? Do you still believe, of course, in love? And would you get married again?
I actually said that I would try it one more time, but I think because this time I would go in with clarity. I would go in with my boundaries intact, and my wants and needs, at the forefront of the relationship, as opposed to, oh my gosh, he really likes me and I think he's going to do right by me. Like, no. Am I even attracted to him? Because I'm just going to be honest, he wasn't that attractive, but he was really, really good to me at first. I'm taking all those things into account. Am I attracted to him? Am I going to be attracted to him 30 years from now? Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally? is that attraction there? So I'm not going to overlook the red flags. I'm not going to settle. I'm not going to just accept certain things and just wonder how it pans out. If it doesn't pan out from day one, I'm very, very strict on what I'm willing to move forward with. So a third marriage would have to be something that I get into maybe 10 years from now.
Wow. And any requirements this time around? Like, counseling together, or we're going to live together for a year, or any, type of things that you really want to work on first before you go down the road again?
I think I would want them to have gone to counseling, be open to counseling for themselves. I need them to, I'm big on vibes and feelings and your spirit. And I need to know that your spirit is settled. I need to know that you've settled your spirit from life, because I'm working so hard to settle my spirit and get my peace. I need you to have exercised all of your demons and be at a place where I am, where I've just, cut off all the baggage. I've healed from it. And I'm just in a place where I could leave a relationship. I need the guy to be that way too, but I need us to come together and want each other, mutually and on the same playing field. So that's really it. I mean, I really don't have any like checklist boxes.
Yeah.
Because it looks differently for every man. But, when you get that feeling of this person is whole, that's what it is. And I just didn't get that with any man that I dated before. So
yeah, there are a lot of broken men and women out there that, and again, like when you think about triggers and stuff, like what triggers you? And then, I don't pretend to be a mental health professional, but I'm kind of like, as I get older, I'm more in tune with that. Like, what triggers you? Because you don't want something that was deeply embedded in you like years ago. And then someone does something and you kind of like twitch, like you twitch your eye or you twitch something because it's like, oh, I know this. I know he didn't, Right. And then it just goes off from there. Right. So, like the journey, one thing that I found, and that's why creating this podcast is like the journey is beautiful of just being by yourself and just figuring you out. Mm-hmm. Because if they, again, if the person comes to you, they compliment you. Right. It's not going to be confusion. The amount of time that, once you see confusion or any ounce of it, you're like, I'm out, Exactly.
I'm the red flag queen. I've learned so much that, there's probably been about five or six or seven guys that have approached me in the last few months since I've been single and celibate. And they can say one thing and I'm just like, yeah, you're not it, I'm just not in that space where I can accept anything less than peace. And if you're coming to me with any little bit, like you said, of confusion, I'm not going to confuse myself with you.
Leave that stuff over there. Yeah. Leave that stuff over there.
That ties back into what we talked about in the dating episode, where we talked about having the, I guess, the wherewithal to know what you want, right? Because so many people, and this is ultimately what ends up leading to like these quickie marriages and quickie divorces, which is people not really knowing what they're looking for. So you're just looking for someone to plug a hole, but you're not sure what it is. So every time something new comes along that's like flashy, you're distracted and you think this might be better. But that's what happens in the dating scene too. So I think what you're saying, Angel, is really, it's like a really honest, way to look at it is, if you know what you want, and the minute you don't recognize, you see that it's not for you, it's easier to kind of step away with no
attachment
about it, no doubts at all, and then you can feel comfortable about just being alone. And right. And a lot of people rush because they don't want to feel that loneliness. But I think the time spent, in figuring out really what you want, asking yourself the hard questions, like you said, peace. That's your word, and that for me, that resonates really with me. I don't want, not that my ex-spouse ever made me feel like I wasn't at peace, but what I want for my future relationships is peace. That's a great way to look at it. When you recognize that the person coming to you, for they may be amazing, but there's just something that doesn't work. It's good to know what you want, so that when you walk away, there are no second thoughts about it. You have no doubts about what you're ultimately looking for. So I love that you said that. It ties back so nicely with what we talked about as far as dating.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you don't want to be in a codependent relationship, because it's just like,
that's another thing we talk about too, where it's like, if you hang that expectation on this person and they let you down because that wasn't what they were bringing to the table. That was an expectation that you unfairly gave them. So when they inevitably let you down, they're also going to be brokenhearted. So that codependency there, that's a good word for it. It's just sort of like, you got to know what you want. So that person knows either they can give it to you or they cannot. And there's a clean separation, and you're not inviting more people. If more people spend time getting to know what they want in the immediacy after leaving the relationship, I think they spare themselves a ton of heartache later on. I think the hard in that moment, being alone, like you said, celibate, focusing on yourself, it might be difficult at times, but I think it spares you so much future heartache.
And also, divorce is not a death sentence, right? You still have your best days ahead of you, and life is still whatever you want to make it. My parents were married 40 plus years. Again, I've been married 20 years. I don't necessarily think about divorce. However, I do think about peace and happiness. And I know what is today may not always be. I know life changes, people change. You just have to hold on to yourself. But I would never stay in a marriage where I wasn't happy or didn't feel love or didn't think it was something to fight for. There's just too much life to live for that. But I do fight like hell all the time for my marriage. However, I don't rule out divorce. Some marriages are like, we will never divorce, or what did Will and Jay say? We're bad marriage for life. It's a
Bad marriage for life.
Yeah,
not gonna happen.
Yeah,
I believe in
nobody got time for that. Like, no.
Right. I believe in there's a lot of life to live, and if it's not working, it's okay. Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I'll be the first one to admit that I was a broken person in both my marriages. If not, I wouldn't have gone into them, because the first one, he cheated before we got married. And then the second one, he admitted that the lady was living in the house before we got married. He ended up putting her out. But what did that say about me? Or except sliding into a role that could very well reverse, and very well did reverse on me. So, I had never had an example of a good marriage on either side of my family. There's probably 15 aunts and uncles. And there are probably three good marriages among the aunts and uncles and all my 100 cousins. So, probably about 4 good marriages throughout my family.
Right,
so none of us knew what to model our marriages after, what to look for, what to look at. And so when I went into my marriage, I'm thinking, well, we have this incredible bond. We have, X, Y, Z. Sounds right. Seems legit, but I've learned, and a lot of people don't go into marriages for the wrong reasons. They go into the marriages for the only reasons they know to go into one for. And that was me, So when you learn those things, of course, you have to now go into the dating field and say, hey, I've been divorced twice. And they're looking at you like, well, what's wrong with you? Well, what was wrong with me then is no longer wrong with me. But, there was definitely something wrong.
Yeah. And you can't really go by that, because a lot of people will have lots to say. They may be like, oh, you've been married twice. What's wrong? Married and divorced twice. What's wrong with you?
There are people that have been married for a really long time that shouldn't be married. So you really can't judge somebody based on that. Like, I feel like it takes a lot more strength to recognize that something isn't working and walking away from it than being like, oh, I don't want to be that person that's, divorced. And it takes a lot of strength. And, that's my example at home. Like, my mom and my dad are divorced. And it took a while for her to get to that point, because she just felt like, well, I have kids and I want my kids to, and when they finally got divorced, we were like, Mom, like, we would have probably been happier a longer time ago had you done this sooner. But, she was so concerned with what she felt like she needed to be that she, you know, it took her long to walk away. So it's commendable that you can see a situation, say, this isn't for me. I'm going to walk away and better myself so that if I do find love again, like, it's not the same pattern over and over.
Right.
Yeah, because if it's the same pattern, you're like, okay, I'm the common denominator, like, you know, or whatever. And marriage is like, you don't have to get married. You don't have to get married like in your 20s, in your 30s, like when our parents were, you know, our age. Like, people are getting married later and later if they're getting married, you know?
Right.
So it's just a lot to learn, but I want to thank you for being so transparent about your journey with, you know, marriage and divorce and stuff. It was really great. And Myrna, thank you for being transparent about, you know, your own. But I want to thank you, Tribe. Thank you, audience. Join us next time when we continue. Actually, next week is pretty exciting because we will have the male point of view on each level. So that's going to be very interesting. But thank you for listening to Unapologetically Fierce with Faythe. We are not just a podcast. We are a movement. Thank you.
Bye, ladies.
Thank you.
Bye. That was great.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. It's really nice to meet you all.
Thank you for joining us at Unapologetically Fierce with Faythe, brought to you by CKJ Live. Come back and visit again to hear more of the unfiltered tea that we are ready to dish. And remember, we are not just a podcast, we are a movement.